Good evening, everyone. I thought I would take 10 minutes of your time. My name is Jeremy Heiler. I am an 8th grade English and science teacher from Fulton Schools, which is in central Michigan. I am also the co-director for the Chippewa River Writing Project out of Central Michigan University. And I'm the vice president of ATAG, a subgroup of National Council Teachers of English. ATAG represents the Assembly for Teaching of English Grammar. Also, am one of the SIG representatives for McCall, and I am a board member for MAMSE, which is the Middle School Association, Michigan Association of Middle School Educators. Pretty busy, but I also am an author, co-author of this particular book, From Texting to Teaching. Thought I'd take some time, give you some snippets out of this, give you one particular strategy out of the book, maybe get you interested in looking at the book, but more importantly, looking at some new ways to introduce grammar to our students. And not only that, but I'd also like to offer some PD opportunities for you where you can invite me into your school if that's something that your principals would be interested in, to do some potential PD opportunities. So let's get started with this. What I'm going to introduce you to tonight is I'm going to show you something called Grammar Slam. My students know it as the grammar templates. This is a really cool tool, something that I designed with another colleague when I was out in Rhode Island quite a few summers ago for the Digital Literacy Institute out there, and something that I came up with my partner that we worked on. This is a template that can be used for a number of different grammar skills in terms of sentence combining, sentence structure, types of sentences, compound, complex, compound, complex, you name it. There's a lot of different things that you can use this template for. We're going to look at some adverbs and adjectives tonight, but this template, what I have here is I have 6 different spaces where students can write, and we use Google Docs. We're a Google school, so we use Google Docs for things in my classroom in terms of handing in papers. You can see that Snapchat is on the template. Snapchat is something that's very popular with students. As a matter of fact, I had a conversation with my students here about 2 or 3 weeks ago about how they do a lot of texting, even more so through Snapchat than they actually do with the texting feature that comes with phones. There's texting here, there's Facebook, there's Twitter, there's email. This is a template, obviously, that's pre-designed by me. You can design it for your own needs in your classroom, and you could actually even simplify it for higher elementary students in terms of maybe only having 3 spaces. The idea behind this is that I am giving the respect to my students in terms of the different spaces that they write in. I talk to them, we have conversations about these different spaces. And your template might look different. Perhaps your students don't write in Snapchat. Perhaps it's Instagram. I know it's something that's changed in my classroom over the years. Twitter, I am finding over the course of the last few years too, is something that my students don't use. So I might be looking at changing that next year. But I do know pretty regularly that my students are doing Google Docs, Snapchat, Facebook, and email, and they're still doing some texting. But for the sake of doing this little preview, giving you a little snapshot of what's in our book, we'll just leave this template the way it is. One of the first conversations, besides the spaces that students write in, that you want to have is also talking to them about what is the difference between formal and informal writing. And that's what these big, huge, dark letters represent. This is a conversation that usually takes anywhere between 10 to 15 minutes with your students when introducing this grammar template or the Grammar Slam idea. We know that, like Google Docs, for example, my students know right away that is a formal space because those are papers that are being turned into the teacher. Snapchat, because there's pictures, you can use your finger to write across the screen. There's lots of different features with Snapchat. They know it's an informal space. Texting, for the most part, is informal. This is where you start leaking in, and students start leaking in to that conversation conversation about audience, which is fantastic. You want to have that conversation with your students because it would depend on your audience, and really that it gets more involved or it evolves more in terms of that conversation about audience when we get into Facebook and email, because the students really do know that it does depend on your audience. So I give them certain scenarios to kind of play out. If you had to email your teacher and you had to ask for your assignments because you were absent, so that would be more of a formal email. If you were Facebooking something on the school Facebook page, or you were Facebooking a family relative that you haven't talked to in a while, you want to be more formal. And then we talk about Twitter being informal because of the hashtags. And at one time you were only allowed so many characters. Now that has changed over the course of time, but nonetheless, we come up with 3 formal spaces and 3 informal spaces. And so the skill that we look at in this particular example that I'm showing you is adverbs and adjectives. And when we're looking at adverbs and adjectives, we are looking at mentor text. And we are getting ready to do a unit. Social Studies has already started it. In terms of mentor text, though, we are looking at a book from the Civil War unit that our social studies teacher is doing, and it's called Behind Rebel Lines by Seymour Wright. And so we look for adverbs and adjectives in that particular book, and I like to use mentor text in my classroom because it helps the students to be able to get that to their writing when they're using those examples. So Google Docs is the easiest one to start with. We take that mentor sentence, we plop it right there into that Google Doc. As you can see, it reads, "Everything is working exceptionally efficient at the supply tent that's as big as the courthouse." You have conversations with your students, you should have conversations with your students about what kind of adverbs or adjectives are in here. We're going to stick specifically with just one adverb, one adjective. Obviously, the adverb in this is exceptionally, and that's easy to pick out for students. And the adjective is big, and so we leave this sentence the way it is because it's a formal space, it's a formal sentence, and then we start talking about these different spaces. So we look at now, we look at the Snapchat, and you can see that students go out and they find a picture on the internet that replicates what this would potentially could look like in a picture. So they plot that picture there. You can see that they put a simple little sentence there: "Party at the CH, all supplies you need." You're not seeing necessarily the adverb or the adjective in that particular scene, that space, but you may want to require that of your students to use that. I know over the course of the years that I've done this grammar template that's more or less something that I require my students. You can also see my students have given credit where the picture is at. Moving along, because I don't want to take up too much of your time tonight, you can see how this might look in a text message. "OMG, you here in the tent, where is tent?" Okay, you can see that some punctuation's left off, very informal. And so then kind of fast forwarding a little bit, you can see the different spaces that students filled out. My favorite is the email, where my students really got very formal and very wordy in their email. Won't insult your intelligence, you can read that on your own time, but you can see how they've used adverbs and adjectives in those different spaces, with maybe the exception of, or I should say with the exception of the texting and the Snapchat space. So one of the things that you can't see on this particular slide that I would wish you could see just because of the recording is that at the bottom in the notes space on Google Slides, I do ask my students to write the rule, and I also ask them to state the rule in their own words, and that way I have a clear understanding of what they are doing. Now, to kind of help you understand how things go, they would do this template together as a group, and then over the course of the years they get more used to this template. I would actually have them do it on their own with the different grammar skills. They do use Grammar Flip weekly with different grammar skills, so they're getting that teaching from Grammar Flip lesson, because I flip my grammar lessons. And then to scaffold, because we scaffold from the grammar lesson to this, the grammar template, and then what they would do is they would apply it in their writing, whatever writing we might be doing, like a compare-contrast essay or an argument writing. And then what they would do is they would highlight those skills, like they would highlight the adverbs, to highlight the adjectives, so that way I can see the application part of this particular lesson that we're doing, because that's the biggest challenge that we face as teachers, right, is how students are actually applying the skill. So that would be how they would apply it in a formal writing space, like a compare contrast. Here's a link for that Google template. You are free to use that Google template. I would suggest that you make a copy because it is view only, and then you can change it however you want to. You have my permission, though the copyright is on there. But what I'm trying to do is encourage you to invite us into your classroom, invite us into your schools. Let's do some professional development. Let's try to make our students better grammar wise and try to make them better grammar students. Grammar is very difficult, especially in this day and age with all of the different informal and formal spaces that students have. If we can get them to differentiate between that, they're going to be stronger writers in the future. We're not going to get them to remember every grammar skill, and that's okay, but at least we can try to help them along the way. And not only that, but we can show them that we do respect the spaces that they write in. So again, invite us into your classroom. If you have any questions for me, you can contact me as well. Here is a picture of both of the books that I have published through Routledge and co-authored with Dr. Troy Hicks. And you can contact me on Twitter. You can follow me on Twitter at Jeremy V. Baller. My website, jeremyhiler40.com. That is a new site that is getting up and running. You'll see this video on there as well, or you can email me if you have any questions. And I hope to hear from you. I ran over my time. This is about an 11-minute video, but hopefully you get some information out of it. And if you have any questions, please do not hesitate to contact me. And I hope everybody has a great evening and you have great spring breaks.